Hey guys, the following is a conversation I had with Mike Duplan of Colorado. Mike is very well known for hunting big mule deer over the years and big bighorn sheep. The thing that's interesting about Mike is that he's not a guide, he's not an outfitter, he's not a guy with hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, yet he's been able to do a ton of hunting and do a lot of quality hunts over his lifetime. So the first thing we talk about in this interview is how does somebody structure their life to do that? What are the choices they need to make? The next half of the interview, we dive into a bunch of topics that I'm gonna forewarn you guys are very controversial even within the hunting community, to the extent that the majority of the hunting community will not even talk about them. We talk about archery wounding loss, we talk about high fences, we talk about raising wild animals domestically and then using them for stocking programs. Me and Mike don't share all the same opinions on this, but I just want you guys to know that I think these are topics that are worth talking about within the hunting community. The latter half of this interview is structured more around actual tactics and strategy for you guys that want to spend the next 5-10 years hunting big mule deer. Mike is a pro at this, but he also knows how things have changed over the last 15-20 years in the mule deer scene in Colorado and beyond. So he talks about tactics and strategies and planning that you can implement in this new world of mule deer hunting. I do apologize for the audio on my end and the slight lag that me and Mike had to deal with. This just had to do with the connection we had remotely. Is what it is. It sounds a little bit like I'm slurring my speech, but that's not what it is. It's just post-audio processing that had to occur to clean up the audio. So guys, without further ado, let's dive right into it. All right, guys, so I wanted to mention that I'm having these custom skinning knives made. These are called Cliff Skinner. I've got a whole bunch of reasons why I've had this knife made the way that it's made. I've got a short video on the website. The details are there. pursuitwithcliff.com. Click in the corner up by shop, you'll see Cliff Skinner. Click that puppy, you'll get all the details.
Mike, I'm super excited to have you on, man. I feel like we should be good friends and we should have had a lot of experience over the years, just running into each other more, but we haven't. We've kind of been in the same worlds, in Colorado, but we just haven't had the chance to run into each other as much as at least I would have liked over time. I've always followed all your hunts from, sheep hunting, big mule deer hunting, all of that, and I've been a fan. And so I'm grateful to have a little time to chat with you. And I think, we're going to talk, I'd really like to talk about the mule deer stuff a bunch, Mike, because I've got viewership that I feel like we've been so elk-centric the last 20 episodes that focusing on mule deer will be a ton of fun. And we will do that. I want to dig into, tactics and your thoughts on, long-term plans for people.
We've got some serious reality checks with mule deer nowadays, and it's not just Colorado, it's across the West. So it's I'm not trying to be pessimistic about it. I'm being realistic. And I think an honest evaluation of what's going on is super important, because it's us who needs to put pressure on the people who make the decisions of how they manage mule deer and how it impacts the mule deer populations across the West. So I think it's important to be honest about what's going on, and that doesn't mean being pessimistic. It's just my opinion, of course, but I think there's some realities and some information that back, and a lot of people agree with what I have to say. It's a glaring example of what's happening. So,
yeah, no, we can dive into that. I think also, Mike, there's from a strategy and like planning mule deer hunts, it's really important to know that stuff. If you're trying to plan mule deer hunts based on what the mule deer world looked like 15 years ago, you're not going to do it the right way, right? So I think that's very relevant in that regard too, not just from the perspective of I'm sure we'd want more opportunities for folks, but also like if a guy wants to kill a big mule deer, he's got to kind of know what the current reality is. You know what I mean? So, so we can dive into that a bunch. But before we started, man, you told me you're going to Tanzania tomorrow. You're leaving tomorrow, right?
Yep, that's exactly.
So,
right.
dude, I'm gonna ask the obvious question, and I want to dive into it right off the bat because I know a lot of people are wondering. Mike, you've done a ton of hunting in your lifetime, and I feel like you're a very relatable guy in terms of your career path, all of that. What's the key, man? What's the key to having a normal gig and a normal lifestyle and still being able to hunt a ton? And we're not talking about cheap hunts. Like, what's your advice on that?
well, one, I had a career path that it gave me the time. And number two, it's about establishing priorities. And so what's important to you? And, hunting's very expensive nowadays, especially guided trips. You know, this trip to Tanzania is ridiculously expensive, but it's less than a stone sheep hunt. And it's, there's Dall sheep hunts that are right in line with this at this point. So, there's people that are willing to spend big amount of money hunting one Dall sheep, and they'll be lucky to kill a ram over 160 at this point. So, it's all about establishing priorities and setting up your life where you can do these certain things. I became a career firefighter at the age of 25. I worked 30 years and retired 3 years ago, roughly. And so, I had the time to do certain things. I built houses on my days off, and it wasn't fun. It took time away from doing other things. And I had friends that had RVs and boats, and they went to the lakes on the weekends. And I built 7 houses on my days off during my career. When I say built 7 houses, I literally drove steel stakes in the grounds and formed up footings and put shingles on the roof myself. There's things I didn't do, such as drywall and insulation. I did drywall in one house with my sister's boyfriend at the time, and that was just an absolute waste of time. It's just the efficiency of trying to do that with it just doesn't make any sense. Just pay people to do that kind of thing. But I earned extra money that way, and I had priorities that I wanted to have these adventures. I wanted to have these experiences, and I went to Alaska. Oh, I got hired in '92, and my first trip to Alaska was '95, and it was a DIY caribou hunt. And I built a couple decks that summer to pay for it. So I had these wants and dreams, and you got to make it happen. Nobody's going to hand it to you. So you know going to Tanzania is a super high end experience, and also price wise, it's among the more expensive things on the planet. And I'm not going to be able to do it again, most likely. But I want to have that true African wilderness experience, the tent camp on the river, the old school stuff, and white tablecloths and silverware, and going out and tracking Cape buffalo during the day. And so it's super important to me to have that experience, and I was willing to pay for it. So
Right. And Mike, particularly when you were a younger guy, how did you do it tactically, man? Because I know I got a lot of viewers that are in this case. Like, there's a lot of guys that I talk to, and they're like, "Well, I'll never be able to kill a bighorn ram because it's just too expensive." And they're a 25-year-old guy. And to me, my mind, I'm like, that's astonishing, man. You have your whole life to figure out how to make an extra 75 grand or whatever it's going to cost, right? That's not, you have your whole life to figure it out. But I understand where they're coming from too. Like, how would you do it tactically, Mike? Would you be like, hey, I want to go on this hunt in 5 years, and then this is like, would you write it down, or like, how did you approach that?
It's pretty unfortunate right now how expensive things are. And there's the reality of some of this stuff is it's simply beyond the level of affordability for people. And there's no way getting around that reality. When you talk about a $45,000 Dall sheep hunt, I mean, when I'm talking to a young man that's making $70,000-$80,000 a year, he's got a wife, 2 small children at home, and he wants to go on a Dall sheep hunt. It's like, that's not a realistic, that's a dream. It's not a really achievable goal. You can do things, but you're going to have sacrifices on many levels. You're going to sacrifice time away from your family. You're going to sacrifice other things in your life, and to absolutely grind out extra work and make it happen. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it, but there has to be a reality check with some of this stuff that it's simply beyond what was affordable, what seemed like it was an everyman's dream hunt. It's not that anymore. These are, a stone sheep hunt is just absolutely ridiculous. I was lucky to get one when I did in 2018, and if I hadn't got one at that point, I wouldn't be getting one now. I wouldn't have had a Grand Slam. There's no way I could justify spending that kind of money or be willing to do it. And so, I understand that people have these dreams and goals, but they've got to be reasonable too. And if you're a young man with a family and a couple small kids, I mean, you got to take care of your kids, because none of that stuff's going to matter when you get old and you think, well, I'm sure glad I got that Dall sheep, but in the process, I lost my marriage and my kids grew up disliking me, resenting me, and that's obviously an extreme situation. But having a big picture approach to it is in being realistic with what you want to do. So that doesn't mean having big dreams, goals, but be real.
Yeah, yeah, dude, it's funny. It's funny, Mike, because I thought your response would be different, man. But I appreciate your candidness on it. And it makes sense. And I think maybe part of the advice that's embedded in there is that if you have a dream of shooting a stone sheep, maybe look for the better deals out there that are similar adventures or whatever. Would you agree with that? That
Yeah,
kind of mentality?
yeah, but there's a dynamic that played out with sheep hunting with COVID. And, Canada was shut down for 2 years. So there's a backlog of hunters. And what that did was take the hunters that were in line and push them back. And outfitters are able to charge more. It's, the fear of missing out, the FOMO, the highly desirable animal that the waiting list just got longer for. Doll sheep in Alaska have absolutely been cratered in many places. So what does that do? That puts more pressure on other spots because, Alaska was kind of like it tempered some of the prices because Alaska outfitters were able to charge a lot less for some of their Dall sheep hunting because they had so much opportunities, which in turn kept some of the Canadian outfitters in check by just simply supply and demand. Now Alaska can't supply those Dall sheep hunts like they have in the past. Alaska Dall sheep prices are close to 30,000 and Canadian prices are usually over 40. It's rare that you get Dall sheep hunts under 40 in Canada anymore. So the COVID thing really impacted guided hunts across the West. And so it created a backlog with elk hunts. I'm sure with booking agents and everything, anything of any quality is booked up 2 to 3 years out right now. And so you got the marginal quality experiences that have raised their prices, and the success rates on those marginal quality experiences are lower too. So, a bargain's not always a bargain, and I urge people to be very cautious with what they do and who they book with at this point in time because it's a seller's market. It's not a buyer's market. I mean, there's moose hunts for $45,000-$50,000 in Alaska for big bull moose. I have a friend who sold some archery elk hunts in probably the most premium private land spot in the lower 48 for elk, and archery hunts for over $40,000 for elk. And so that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. So people have money and they're willing to pay, and it's just the unfortunate aspect of supply and demand.
Yeah. And the thing is I think it's been a while since the world has been different, Mike. But I remember when I started outfitting, more at volume, so like 14 years ago, it was hard. It was hard to book up your elk hunts. Like if you had a good, once you got a good reputation, you would stay, you'd stay booked. You might have your hunts booked a year in advance. But now, I mean, even marginal experiences, marginal outfitters, they're booked several years out. It's just compacted. The elk hunting space is one that I'm closest to or whatever, but it sounds like you're really familiar with a lot of the sheep stuff. It's the same way. But what's interesting is you see opportunity the other way. And tell me if I'm wrong, Mike, but it seems like desert sheep have come down a little bit.
Yeah, because there's so many hunts available, and part of it is the fact that Mexico has turned a lot of desert sheep hunting into high fence operations, and they're breeding rams, they're raising them, and yeah, they're bred and fed in Mexico, and that's truly unfortunate because it's there's some places that you could tell the rams are bred in high fence just by the color of their horns. You look at those classic Mexico rams; they rub their horns on cactus year round. They got those beautiful orange horns. Then you see these overgrown, large. I call them big hoopy rams because their nutrition is so great that they're growing so fast that curve is just extended. So what it turned, it breeds these big hoopy rams with light colored horns because they're in pens and they don't have a chance to rub their horns on stuff. So, it's got to be given guys at Boone and Crockett fits at this point to see what's going on and how to manage that and the ethics of it involving entering animals in Boone and Crockett. So, there's certainly just a lot of desert sheep hunt's available in Mexico for that reason. So buyer beware there too.
Right. Yeah, and that's a dynamic that's really interesting because very few people talk about it. I mean, it appears to me that there's it's occurring somewhat in mule deer too
Yes, it
down
is.
there.
Yeah.
And we may have a different we may have some differing opinions on it, Mike. Like I totally agree with what you're talking about with the desert sheep. It's very weird to see a distortion of a species that's of a wild species. But then there's always a part of me that's like, well, is there something good about there being more opportunity, more supply of hunts? And I'm not saying like one, that they should just be able to high fence. Like to me, anything that is being marketed that's not a high fence animal, that's a problem. Or they're marketing it as a free range animal and it's a high fence. That's just, to me, that's just fraud, and that's like a totally, even outside of the wildlife world, that's not right. But there's part of me, it's like, well, is there any positive to these stocking type of programs? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you could come up with some positives there. I mean, you're propagating the species, you're making more opportunity for hunters, the price is coming down, and it's at a cost. So, when you talk about cost benefit analysis to what's going on, one of the things that's interesting about this high fence stuff is if it was so um, ethically acceptable, why wouldn't people be talking about it more? But it's almost like it's a dirty little secret because in general, they know most people don't approve of that kind of thing. It makes them uncomfortable. There's an ick factor with raising animals in a pen, turning them loose, and calling it a wild hunt. So I get that there's a product, a supply and demand, but it starts getting weird, and it challenges you to think about it. And if you're trying to rationalize it on a certain level and say because of this, because of that, well, it's maybe that's the time to take a step back. Is like, are we doing the right thing here? And that's kind of how I feel
Yeah.
about.
No, please.
I probably can't go to Mexico now because
About
they
so
snuff me out.
yeah. No. I'm with you, man. In absolutely, there should be transparency about it.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's the biggest issue. Is like people misleading. I mean, I know of people who have gone to Mexico and they thought they were going on what they thought was a free range, hunt, and it really wasn't. That's I mean that's not okay. And but there's on the other side that I kind of do hope that over time we do view is it okay for somewhere to, would it be okay for, let's say, Colorado to have a breeding facility of bighorn sheep that they stocked habitat that could have bighorn sheep in it over the years? Would that be a bad thing? In my mind, if it was done a certain way, no, that'd be all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's different than what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is, and there is actually a high fence breeding operation for bighorn sheep in Colorado, and they have, they take the rams out to another fence location out east of I-25 in the Canyonlands and turn them loose, and people shoot them, and they're gigantic rams, but it's like, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's not what. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
what you're
That's
saying
different.
is, if we have the opportunity to breed bighorn sheep in a controlled situation in order to bolster wild herds or whatever. I guess in theory it could be okay, but there would have to be a generational distance to true fair chase hunting when you turn domesticated wild animals loose again. And so just from an ethical standpoint. So, I've seen pictures of some of these giant bucks in Mexico inside of horse trailers. Same one guys are posing behind the railing, and that's freaking gross, man.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're not in disagreement on that, Mike, for sure. It's a super interesting conversation. Fortunately, I know, because it's not discussed much, I only know, just like very, very high level stuff of what's going on. But it's one of these things that I'd love to talk, get in, do a whole podcast on, just because I think it's a very interesting,
Yeah,
question of where
it's
hunting
truly
is
interesting
going.
because it's a reflection of human nature and we have this propensity to want to do these kind of things. Just for one, hey, there's an opportunity. Hey, we can make some money. It's not hurting anything, you know. And so, what you're talking about is an ethical barometer that people keep within them, and everybody's got their sliding scale of what, you take a traditional bow hunter, and he probably thinks I'm a total asshole because I got a rifle that'll shoot 500 yards. Well, and then myself, it's a rifle hunter, and I think about wounding loss in bull elk in Colorado, and it's just I'm beside myself with irritation by the whole thing because you want to talk about hurting people's feelings. Start bringing up wounding loss in archery hunts, and you'll freaking light people up, man. But there's some harsh reality people are unwilling to talk about too.
Well, it's
So
really interesting. It's interesting you brought it up, Mike, because it's something that I'll talk about openly, and
uh
I've been chastised about it, and I understand some people's perspective of like, hey, that a lot of this stuff that you want to talk about, Cliff, it's from my perspective, and this could be totally biased. To me, it's just like intellectual curiosity, right? Like, why do people ignore this versus they discuss this? But then a lot of people's argument is like, well, those topics, they just create this internal division within hunters. My personal feeling, Mike, is like, well, if we don't talk about these things, there's really no like overall. I mean, you can't just hide them. You know what I mean? You can't just hide the fact that it exists. And it's kind of analogous to the discussion we had. We're not going to find a solution to, is there a place for, the, basically like stocking type of programs? Is there a place for that? I don't know if the answer is yes or no, but if we don't talk about it, we're never gonna get there. You know what I mean? And I feel like the archery deal is the same thing. It's very analogous to what you said. A bunch of people don't want to. Everybody knows that it's there, but they don't want to talk about it.
right.
And it's kind of, there's another part of it that bums me out about it, Mike, because I also feel like it's very discouraging to new archers because they go out, they experience the reality of archery hunting, big, strong animals, and then all of a sudden they think they're the anomaly and that they're doing something wrong, or it deters them from even continuing to hunt. To me, it's troubling. Like I talk to guys all the time. They're like, I'm still devastated about this bull I lost last year, or I'm losing 20% of the bulls that I hit, and it's like, dude, that you're probably doing pretty damn good. You know what I mean, in the spectrum of archers. So I don't know. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, if a guy's only losing 20% of the bulls, it's like, I've heard archers talk about success with how many shots they got for a day in the field. Like that was part of the success that they accounted for was, oh, I had 3 shots today. I'm like, that's insane. It's like I can't believe somebody would actually say that out loud. And I'm very, very careful about shot placement on elk. I've only wounded one in my life, which is one too many. But when I my wife and daughter, I only let them shoot standing broadside elk, and that's a rifle. If you're not shooting standing broadside elk with archery equipment, I feel like you're making a mistake because nothing's going to die with holes in, or nothing's going to live with holes in both lungs. But you talk about there's a lot of room for error if you're not shooting, you know, the line of the back leg, mid body, holes in both lungs. That's a dead elk. Period. You know, any archer in the world, that's a dead elk. And why are we losing so many bulls in archery season? If that's the case, because guys they're not being disciplined, and it takes discipline and patience to get that shot. And when you have a bullet, I get it, 25 yards away from you, quartering toward you, and like I can make this. Well, I got a friend who guided 5 archery elk hunts, and every single archer last year wounded and lost a bull out of 5, 5 out of 5, and none of them took home a bull. And he feels like, I'm not going to mention his name, but he feels like 80% of bulls that are hit are lost with archery equipment. And this is I know there's archery hunters right now. If they're watching this, they're just cussing me out, and I get where you're coming from. That maybe that's not you, and you feel like I'm giving archery a bad name, but I don't. There's people that aren't disciplined in their shot placement, and they're rushed and they're excited and all the other, and it's just the reality of what's going on. I have no solutions for that. When we talk about all these problems, whether it's high fence in Mexico or archery wounding loss, what it really comes down to is that there's a mental aspect to this, that how we square all this stuff in our head. And when we have to square difficult things, when we have to look in the mirror and all that, it's very, very troublesome for people to do this kind of thing. And most people want to avoid just having those thoughts or discussions. And it's all the uncomfortable stuff. The whole thing with the mountain lion. That we're going to go down that rabbit hole, I would imagine, at some point. But I appreciate that mountain lion hunting is. We salvaged the meat. I killed a mountain lion. I made smoky sticks out of the whole lion and gave them out to people more as a novelty thing for guys. When I was working on the fire department, I did the whole thing at work. I gave all kinds of snack sticks to people just to try. And I felt like there was an aspect of that was helping perpetuate acceptance of hunting by sharing the meat. And it opened some eyes, like, this is mountain lion? Wow, it's really good. It's like, yeah, it's spiced up. It's got some pork added to it just for, because that's how you process meat and make those snacks fit. But, I think that's a positive element to it. But, the whole aspect, I think some of the battle that's going on with the mountain lion thing and the whole trophy species, and yes, we're required to keep the meat and eat it and all that. But there's also, I think the biggest difference is the value set and the approach, the mindset of people that have in their opinions on whether or not this should be a valid opportunity for people in Colorado is to hunt mountain lions. And, that's really where are people willing to stretch the truth in order to further their agenda? And you see the other side doing that. And that's one thing I think it's important for, us to be honest, because the culture war in this country plays right into these animal activist type topics, whether it's wolves or mountain lions or any sort of anti-hunting. It's pretty clear that the lines are drawn on both sides of the political issue. So that should make people take a step back and wonder, why is that? What is super important about that people are feeling like they need to take a side on some of these issues? Not just take a side, but dig their heels in. And the mountain lion one is super curious to me how it'll play out, because what's interesting is our presidential race is a toss-up right now, and so is the mountain lion thing. And are we that evenly divided in this country, or is there something else at play that some aspect of human behavior and physiology that we've basically have these two options in our our mental capacity to evaluate things and make choices? It's like, are we simply that limited of this leftist or conservative view of things? It's really weird to me, and I'm fascinated with how this is all playing out right now. And I have a curious mind, as I know you do too, and that's what makes a good podcaster in my mind, is a curious mind. So, yeah, like I said, we just went down a rabbit hole, but I think the most important thing about this mountain lion thing is you have a small contingent of society that's trying to influence most of that left to vote a certain way to end something that the other half views as acceptable and that they approve of. So they may not want to hunt lions, but they're willing to let other people do that because they have the mindset of accepting people and knowing that there's differences and different approaches. So
Right. What's weird about it to me, Mike, is that I don't really view it as it's not like ideologically, it's not split 50-50 on the mountain lion thing from a population perspective. I think if you talk to 70% of the people in Colorado, they just don't care. Like, this is not even on their radar. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care about it. But when it comes down to, the actual, when that initiative is voted on, it's going to be very close to 50-50. So that's what's really astounding to me. It's like there's just a huge population that's going to vote on this, or they're already voting on it. I know that, it's all mail-in ballot there, so there's already people who are voting on it. It's all this playing with the issue of this big population that really doesn't care about it. You know what I mean? It's just like, who can convince them to pull each side, and then because we're so split, it ends up like right at that 50-50 all the time.
Yeah. And that's amazing to me that it can be that close I mean, like even in our country with the presidential election, that it's basically a toss up. I'm astounded that that's the case. And it just boggles my mind why that would be. It just doesn't make sense to me that how you could take 350 plus million people and be so evenly split. It doesn't make sense. You would think, some of this stuff would be slanting much harder one way or the other. But I do think part of the issues, in relation to the Mountain Lion Initiative, is I think with a lot of the stuff the far left has pulled in the last couple of years, the pendulum has swung too far, and I think Middle America is saying, "Now hold on a minute, I'm not a racist. I'm not against this, and I'm for a tighter border, and I have empathy for people from Middle American countries and how tough they have, and I understand they want to come up here, but I also feel like we need a tight border." So, with all these social issues playing out to each side, I think the pendulum has swung too far, and there might be people in the middle that are saying, "You know what, we need to tap the brakes on some of this stuff," and maybe the wolf ballot issue was so close that it's possible the mountain lion one will be. It's possible it'll be shut down just simply out of a contingent of people saying, we don't need to be going this far all the time with everything. And it might be simply for ideological reason that they vote on it for that rate.
Yeah, and in my hope, Mike, and this may be coming from just a biased media that I consume, is I hope that a lot of people who are residents in Colorado, and I'm not a resident there anymore, but the residents who are there, I hope that they do reflect on the wolf issue a little bit, and they're like, man, that kind of was a hustle. Like, we voted for it. It turns out that even thus far, it's turned out to be a totally different thing than it was depicted as. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I hope that plays in a little bit.
Yeah, it's embarrassingly poor results for the Wolf Initiative at this point. I mean, somebody made a point to me, like if you were adopting dogs from the Pound or the Humane Society and you lost 4 out of 10 dogs you adopted, they wouldn't let you adopt dogs anymore. But you'd actually you get put on a list. There's these cat orders and stuff. There's people that aren't allowed to adopt pets anymore because they don't treat them right and they do so poorly. So yeah, and we're having bad results. And for years, Colorado Parks and Wildlife was adamant about. I got a stupid fly bugging me right now. Sorry. Parks and Wildlife was shooting down the idea of the wolf reintroduction simply for the fact that the issues we're seeing play out right now. That the fact that there's all these winter range areas in northwestern Colorado where they wanted to drop wolves, they winter cattle and sheep in the country, and so wolves don't care. They don't have a preference of eating elk over beef or anything. They're going for the easiest meal, and what you have with the easiest meal is cattle. So they set them up for failure, and it's playing out that way, and it's pretty obvious. And we're 9 months into, just ended 9 months of the first year of the wolf reintroduction, and we've lost 4 of them out of the field. I mean, one's still in captivity, but 3 are dead, and the year isn't over yet. I mean, if the statistics play out, we could probably use another 1 or 2 wolves before the end of the year. So for anybody who lives in the Rockies this time in the fall, anybody knows that you got flies that just come in your house like crazy if you live in the mountains. And so I've been swatting and killing maniac the last couple of days. It's still warm enough, but they're crawling through every little hole. And I got one that's just decided to pick on me right now, so you have to excuse me.
Yeah, that's all good, man. They know that winter's coming.
Yeah.
So which is kind of crazy. I mean, as an update on that front, not to like totally shift topics, It's been crazy warm, huh?
Yes, I wore shorts almost every day this summer up until yesterday, and I wore long pants yesterday, and I was regretting it.
Yeah, dude,
So
I was helping some guys on the Apache Reservation or in the Hickoria,
yeah,
about I guess a week ago or so, and at 7,000 feet, 7,500 feet, there was still bees.
yeah,
We were caping bulls and there's bees, all over the place. I'm like, man, this feels like September 1st. It's
yeah.
85 degrees,
It's a very
pretty
warm time.
wild, but just kind of a different year in that
I
regard.
know.
Um, bef- Before we jump off the politics, because I have a burning question, Mike, that I didn't get your answer on, and I'm very curious. How do you, when somebody says on these topics that we're talking about, the archery thing, any of these other sensitive topics within the hunt, the archery thing, the high fence thing, any of the sensitive topics that are within the hunting community, when somebody says to you, hey, just the discussion of that is hurting us as hunters. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, the discussion of child molestation in the Catholic Church hurts the impression of the Catholic Church. Should we not discuss it? I mean, why do we want to be intellectually dishonest? And I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and what he talks about is like the only thing that really matters is the truth. And I think it's important to talk about these. And if it changes behavior, if it makes people think twice, if there's a few less bulls that are wounded and lost because guys are taking a pause and thinking about, man, I shouldn't take that shot. I need to be more responsible, because certainly not all of it is the case, but I can't imagine that a lot of bulls aren't lost simply because of shot placement choice. And it's like, you shooting bulls in the shoulder blade. I get that, sometimes you can punch through, but quite often you don't. And it's all about choices there. And so, I don't think we should shy away from tough topics simply because they make us uncomfortable personally. And just being intellectually honest with this, and having that whole take on this is like, well, you're not doing hunting any a favor by, or hunting hunters a favor by bringing these topics up. Well, good. Do something about it. Self police.
So,
That's what we
yeah, I
need.
mean, no, yeah, and I agree with that, Mike. I mean, what I tell people is like, look, you're assuming that there is not a cost to not talking about it, and
Yeah.
I know that there is. Like particularly on the archery thing, there are
Hmm.
guys right now who are new bow hunters, and in
Hmm.
my experience, and so I've kind of thought about it in my mind, Mike. In my experience, my data set with archery hunters, bulls that are hit to recovered, it's right around half. So not as extreme as the individual you said, but that's about what I see, at least in my data set, is about half of them. Which
Yeah.
that even sounds, I mean, when I say it out loud, it's like, oh, geez, man, it's like painful.
Yeah.
But to some new archers, they need to hear that because they don't know.
Right.
They have no idea that's the data. Because once you know that, I feel like you're going to be like, okay, that's a thing. I want to make sure that my batting average is a whole hell of a lot better, because that's not acceptable to me personally. But if you don't know that, you can't adjust.
No, and as we both know, that it's a sickening feeling for people to lose animals. I've been around other people that have lost them, and it's just awful. I had a buddy that shot a buck, and he hit it in the guts, and he shot it. His other shot took out one of the legs, and it was swinging a front leg, and it was gut shot. And it was in the evening, and we couldn't get there in time to find him that evening, and went back and scoured it the next day. And it was a tremendous deer, just an absolute world class, probably 34 inches wide, heavy horned, really heavy horned, bladed out tines, big giant back forks, a couple cheaters, and we never found him. And he's dead. Gut shot with one of his front legs blown off. He's dead, and we couldn't find him. It was horrible to lose him. And it makes you think. Those are the instances that those are the reality checks, and I hope that some hunters that lose elk by wounding them, it'll make them think twice next time. And that's the only thing you can hope. You hope people hear these stories and learn from the mistakes of others too. And, have that discipline to wait for that broadside shot where you can zip it through both lungs behind the shoulder, and you got a dead elk, man. You got a wonderful outcome. So that's better than thinking about the sickening thought of somebody finding your rotten bull 5 days later and putting something on a I Hunt Colorado Facebook page about another wounded bull that somebody lost and found. I was really surprised. I know it has everything to do with social media and the ease of communication, but I was really amazed at the number of those kind of stories that popped up on Facebook pages this year about wounded bulls being found and lost, that kind of thing. So it made me
Yeah,
think.
yeah, sure. Yeah, no, no, absolutely, man. And every time I guide archery, and you know, you get those, you're inevitably going to get those situations if you guide much archery, or if you're hunting a lot of archery. Every time, I think when it does go bad, at least for my viewers' sake, go through and analyze what happened. For me, Mike, I try to video every archery shot. I try to video. It's not, it's hard. Like it's another challenge within hunting, but I like to video every one, because if it doesn't turn out how the archer shot or how I thought it was going to turn out, why is that? And dude, I've learned so much. Like this dynamic you're talking about, like both lungs.
Yeah.
If people think that is a basic concept with elk, they're wrong. Because an elk, you can run an arrow through the close side lung and out the liver or out the guts when you think that bull is broadside. You have to truly know what broadside looks like. And if you do that, you only get one lung, your chances of getting them are freaking low. You know what I mean? And so you have to like study that. You have to be a student of their anatomy and what it really looks like for them to be broadside, right? It's not a basic thing,
No, but it's important. I mean, that's part of being a responsible hunter is having, that awareness, the knowledge, and the discipline to do it the right way. And I get it, man. There's probably nothing more exciting than calling in a bull up close and having them bugle in your face and all that. And so you're talking about a situation that's it's rare for most people to have that kind of experience, and it's going to rattle a lot of guys. I mean, people will flat lose shit when they like that. And so I get it. There's a lot going on, and I feel like a lot of people put arrows into bulls' shoulders simply because they're not thinking anatomy at the time. They're thinking, it's ingrained into people's minds that putting one through both shoulders, that kind of thing, and that's the only thing that makes sense for you see so many bulls that are lost, but a lot of them are just lost because their shoulder shot and not getting really good penetration. And so if it makes you wonder what is if people are reverting back to some sort of thought process, that whether or not they're shooting at a target a certain way or whatever. Maybe they've got they're shooting at a paper target that's got an X on the shoulder, and they practice like they play. So that is ingrained in their mind to put their eye on that spot and hold for it. And so I don't know. All I can say is, I don't want to chastise people. I just say, man, do better. That's all you can say.
Yeah, sure.
Try to do better.
Yeah, and in the last thing I'll say on the topic, Mike, is that, dude, there's nothing wrong with rifle hunting. I mean, I know you're a rifle hunter, and I do both, but I hate the fact that in the last 5 to 10 years, there has been like a declining reputation of rifle hunting. Rifle hunting is awesome, particularly for newer people. Like, why would you not start with that? You know what I mean? It's more forgiving, and the other thing is if you never kill anything, and this is going to be an unpopular view, but if you never kill anything, you are absolutely missing out on a part of what hunting is. You know what I mean? Like even just from I mean, this is like old news to you, but to me, just the skinning and the quartering and all of that, like that's fun, man. That's like a really important part of this. If you don't ever get an opportunity to do that, you're really losing part of the experience, man.
Yes.
And to me, for newer people, like go on some rifle hunts, kill some stuff, because I think that's fun, makes this enjoyable. Go go do it. So
There's
it's
no
kind of my
shame
last
in
thought.
using a rifle. I've got a buddy who's an avid longbow hunter, and he's killed cow elk with me with a rifle. And I think for new hunters, adult onset hunters, what's super important is completing that circle, that field to table experience, and the whole loop. Whether from becoming a marksman to learning about the animals to learning woodsmanship and the outdoors qualities that you need to be successful. And when you talk about where do you start, it's not easy. And so what's really important is having some success and bringing that into your experience and completing that field to table experience. That having that meal, sharing the meat, cooking it yourself if you so desire. I think it's a really cool thing to process your own meat. Not everybody's got the time or willing, but there's an aspect to it is very sad. I hate doing it, absolutely hate it, but I do it because I like the satisfaction. I like the feeling of being done with it, and I like opening up the freezer and seeing it packed full of meat. And so,
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I don't
doing
think
it,
that's weird at all, dude. I think that's pretty normal. I think
yeah.
that's probably inherent in us a little bit, Mike.
I put a post up
So,
on Instagram once or Facebook, I don't know what it was, about that. And there's people that absolutely love it. And they're, like chiming in. And I thought, well, good for you, dude. I killed a Shireless bull in 2014 here in Colorado. And it was a warm October. And I did the whole thing by myself. My wife is at work and I'm doing it on my days off from the fire department. And so I basically did a whole Shiras moose by myself, and I freaking hated it. It took me 2.5 days, So, yeah, the fun wore off. My back was just trash because I'm 6'7". So when you're cutting on a counter, I have to bend over slightly. And so it's just like when you do that for like 6-8 hours, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, the counters are made for, people that are 5'10" to 6 foot, not 6'7". So.
yeah, sure. But no, but it's done deal, mission accomplished. I get the same thing, dude. I'm literally thawing out or I got some partially frozen elk out right now that I'm gonna cut for jerky today with the kids. It's like the same thing. I got better shit to do. You know what I mean, Mike? But it's something about doing it yourself is kind of cool.
Yep, absolutely. Especially when you make something cool like jalapeno cheddar bratwurst. If you take the time to do those, they're just a total pain in the ass to make. But when you get those, they're so freaking good. I just love eating those things.
And, oh yeah. No, I'm the same way. And then you also, once you do them yourself, you no longer shun the the prices that processors tell you, right? You're like, oh, that's a good deal, because I know how much work goes into that. You know what I mean?
It basically costs almost as much to have it processed and that stuff made as it does to, buy beef or pork bratwurst. And it's like, why? Yeah, I get it though. Very labor intensive, and so if you got a good processor doing it the right way, I can see why they charge good money.
It just is what it is. But no, it's those are all great topics, man. But we got to talk about mule deer, Mike, because my exposure to you over the years is you're like the mule deer guy in Colorado, or one of them. You know what I mean? You've been involved in, I know you've kept track of a lot of big deer. You've been involved in hunting a lot of big deer. So let's dive into it, dude. You popped out when we first started the interview with kind of some thoughts on mule deer. So let's cover this, man. Let's cover where you think mule deer are at. And I know there's going to be, just the reality there. It might feel a little bit negative, but just give us the reality of where they're at. But then let's follow on if a guy is 25, 30 years old, and he has the dream of hunting big mule deer, not necessarily in Colorado, anywhere, what advice you'd have for him? It could be, it could be long-term advice too. So,
Yeah, I'm going to give a
go
little
for it,
history
man.
on Colorado mule deer and what many people know is Colorado has and has deserved the reputation as the best mule deer hunting in the West.
I do very few endorsement deals and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. I'll stick a link right here where you can sign up. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there.
And so during the 60s, when a lot of the great bucks were taken in the past, there was a dynamic in place with predator control, poisoning, and wildlife management that allowed deer populations to explode. And with those numbers, a lot of hunting opportunities, a lot of big bucks were taken, and everything like that. So, it kind of tapered off through the 70s and 80s. And by the time the 90s rolled around, mule deer were, there was mule deer across the West. And these were articles in many publications, Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, all the big magazines were talking about the decline of mule deer across the West. And Colorado was not exempt from that. So we had a group of people, and you probably remember some of the stuff that was going on with activism for tighter controls on mule deer hunting, and a lot of there was a stakeholders group that was formed, a lot of meetings with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, a lot of pressure. The guys from the Gunnison Basin were very adamant and very vocal about trying to change mule deer management in the state. So I don't know if it was 99 or 2000, but right about then they went to the limited deer licenses and really tightened up the tag allocations. Well, in just a few short years, 5 years later, mule deer hunting in Colorado just exploded with the quality and quantity of bucks. And it wasn't quite the number from an opportunity standpoint that maybe some people would want to see, but mule deer hunting was off the charts. I mean, a lot of guys took home great bucks, and I think there was a high level of satisfaction with deer hunters and what they had. However, it wasn't an opportunity-based management style. And then we had the winter of 2007 and 2008 that absolutely decimated deer herds in some of the critical areas such as Middle Park, Eagle County, Gunnison Basin, where the higher elevation deer wintered. And they were, the deer were absolutely crushed in that winter. I remember my kids were little. We were living up in Silverthorne, Colorado, and my kids had a track meet in Gunnison in that spring. And driving down Highway 50 from Monarch Pass going into Gunnison, it was just absolute tragic to see the number of road-killed deer there. And out in the sagebrush, just bleached out carcasses and, hides and that kind of thing. And, the pendulum swung the other direction at that point. There's wildlife managers within CPW said, we can't stockpile big bucks, and, we got to do something about this. We can't ever have this happen again. And so, the extreme went to the other way, where we really bumped up opportunity at the expense of quality. And so I think there's been a little ebb and flow from that, but I think we're at the bottom end of quality right now. There's a fair amount of opportunity in the state, but it's having to be pulled back too, because numbers of deer in Colorado are just not what they were. And so I think there's a bit of a misperception where a lot of people don't understand how dire the situation is here in Colorado. And I think people are in love and maybe denying some of the realities of the day. They're in love with the past of Colorado. And, what's funny is you see people cheering that they got this Colorado deer tag when the spring draws come out on social media. It's like, I don't know if you know what you realize what you have, buddy, but it's not, you don't have a deer tag from 2005. That's 19 years ago right now. And things have radically changed. I listen to, anytime I do a podcast with somebody, I try to listen to a few of their podcasts just to kind of familiarize myself with the host and just kind of get an idea what they do. But I did listen to you and Scott Limmer talk about this. I'm not alone in this. in my opinion on this. Most people that I know that are pretty well aware of Colorado deer hunting feel the same way. It's like, they're not happy with what's going on. And Scott said it's a travesty. And I think that's a perfect word for it. It is an absolute travesty what's happened to mule deer in Colorado with an understanding of how good it could be and how bad it is. And, I look at, I know Robbie Denning, and he's been on your podcast, and I love Robbie's eternal optimism. I think that's a good mindset to carry through life, but I don't think the optimism is quite acceptable when it comes to mule deer management. And, there is a, you can't poo-poo it and say, well, I'm never going to hunt deer again now. It's so bad. There's that. You have to be, I think there's some advocacy that needs to take place on part of hunters themselves. And it might mean that people need to start pounding their fists on the table and getting organized and going back to CPW again and saying, hey, we need to do something about this. We're not happy about our deer hunting in Colorado. We could do better. So I did a little research, if you'll indulge me right now, but I went on Boone and Crockett's website, which is they have a trophy search a feature in there where you can search the archives of animals entered in Boone and Crockett, and so you can filter it by state, by county, by date, by year, all that above. So I did some year-to-year filters on some certain things. And so I wrote this stuff down, and it's pretty telling what's going on right now in Colorado. When you take into account that the deer licenses were radically limited starting around the year 2000. So in 2000, there were 9 Boone and Crockett bucks entered from Colorado in 2000. Only 2 of those were over 190. So that. And then you jump up to 2005, where we're 5 years into our new tag limitations and new allocation format of more of a quality-based. So in 2005, there were 28 Boone and Crockett bucks, so triple, and 13 were 190 plus. The following year, 2006, there were 25 Boone and Crockett bucks, 14 of which were 190 plus. Real similar to 2005, 2006. If you get to 2007, and when you do the math, from 2000 to 2007, that's roughly about the age of it takes for a mule deer to reach full maturity, 7 years. In 2007, there were 50 Boone and Crockett deer killed in Colorado that were entered, and possibly a few more. 18 of those 50 were over 190. Now, fast forward, a decade and a half later to 2023 and 2022 with these the opportunity-based hunting. For each one of these years, 2023, they're exactly the same. 6 Boone and Crockett deer, 3 were 190 plus for each one of those years, 22 and 23. So that says a lot to me about where we've come and where we've gone with mule deer management. So it's not simply about Boone and Crockett deer and trophy class deer. What a Boone and Crockett deer is evidence of age class within a herd. And so you have genetic potential, which is higher in some areas than others. For instance, Eagle County has super high typical genetics. There's a lot of, even the non-typical bucks that are entered out of Eagle County generally have huge frames. So you have that potential for, like in Eagle County, you got the potential for 4-year-old bucks to reach Boone and Crockett class. And whereas, you take an area like the Missouri Breaks in Montana, you might never see a Boone and Crockett deer in your lifetime just because of the genetic potential is lacking up there. But, these numbers that I just showed you, when, peaking in 2007 with 50 Boone and Crockett bucks in 1 year taken out of Colorado, and we only had 6 in 2023. I mean, that's strong evidence of what we're doing with our management. And what you have is when you have too many tags, what you have is selective pressure on the younger bucks on a sequential year after year basis. And by the time these age class bucks should be reaching 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, there's such a small representation of the animals within the herd, they're almost non-existent. And that's evidenced, like say in Middle Park, where they really bumped up the tag numbers for chronic wasting disease management around Kremling, if people are unfamiliar with that. But that whole high mountain valley up there in what they call Middle Park, is a tremendous deer area. Great sagebrush winter range and all that. And I know guys up there. Clay Hill's a buddy of mine, and I know is in Conway. They're both outfitters. Jody Hill, they don't even outfit up there for mule deer anymore. They can't. They can't sell hunts ethically and still have people. Everybody that goes away is going to be unhappy. And you talk about the guys with public land tags out there, and there's no buyer beware within CPWs. All they do is say that this area is managed for CWD. What they don't say is we've allocated enough tags that the buck numbers are cratered here, and you're probably better off looking somewhere else. So that has an impact. And then you have an impact of people moving from that area where they would have hunted to other areas, and the pressure goes up in other areas for tag allocations, all the above. So, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul with some of this management style, and we're so heavy on our tag allocations right now that we just don't have many mature bucks or many bucks reaching full maturity in Colorado anymore. And that's, these last 2 years of Boone and Crockett entries that I laid out, as far as 6 from 22 and 23, not a single one of those was from Eagle County. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't any killed in Eagle County, but Eagle County is home of Unit 44, which is the most highly coveted deer tag in Colorado. Now, you don't have a single buck that's been entered out of Eagle County in 22 or 23. That is a glaring example of how, and there's been years where there were 6 or 8 typicals entered out of Eagle. So even the Shangri-La of mule deer hunting in Colorado, Unit 44, highly acclaimed, everybody touts it. Put in, you got 25 points, put in for that. It's not what it was.
Right. And just to stop you right here, Mike, because I know that a lot of people are going, their reaction to this discussion is going to be, well, Mike, you're talking about this all in the context of trophy mule deer, right?
Right.
And I just wanted to interject, Mike, because I think that people, as an example, one year I decided every deer we killed in the flat tops, I was going to age them.
Yep.
I just wanted to know. So I just bore the cost. We pulled the teeth on all these bucks. We did it for 2 years, and I had them all aged. And there were deer, and this is super heavily hunted units. You're probably familiar with that 25, 26
Yep.
type of stuff, where I was in the flat tops. Heavily hunted stuff, but we would kill some big deer. And I had deer come back that were aged at 4.5 years old that were 180-inch deer. You know what I mean? Like crazy good genetics, and they can get big fast. So I guess my thought, just so people know, is that you're talking about a resource that when Mike says, hey, there's this many Boone and Crockett deer, there's this many big deer, that's an indicator that there's also large numbers of just, spectacular deer. They may not be Boone and Crockett deer, but they're like the next age, they're the next year down or the next 2 years. Like all the tiers of deer quality are better when you're shooting some, more of the big deer. So it's an indicator of that.
But I call it the Boone
the
and
other
Crockett.
side, go ahead.
I just said I call it the Boone and Crockett barometer. It's not about what it is evidence to me of mature buck representation within herds. So that that was my point there with these numbers, and what I'm trying to show is that we're not even getting these because they're not there, and if they're not there for a reason. We're over hunting mule deer. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, then, and we're over hunting them in the genetic pools that are the best mule deer hunting on earth. I mean, maybe I'm biased, I don't know, Mike, but when you look at how quick they get big, I don't know there's another place on planet Earth.
No.
You know what I mean? And go ahead.
I said you probably you've been around mule deer and being harvested in different places. I'm sure different states, and you look at the body size of some of those bucks from that Eagle County to Middle Park and Gunnison, and they're just absolutely gigantic bodied deer. They rival some of those Alberta and Saskatchewan deer body wise. So what that's evidence also of is really super high level range and conditions for them. And if that's the case, the antlers are surplus on these animals. If they don't have great habitat or feed, they're not going to grow great big antlers. Generally speaking, there's obviously there's deviations to all these rules depending on where you're at in North America, but by and large, when you've got really big bodies and big antlers, that just says this is a very successful place for these deer to live. They do well here. They've adapted to it, and so, yeah. And my point is not about we should manage to have more Boone and Crockett mule deer. It's not about that. The Boone and Crockett record books are evidence of the health of a herd in my mind, and if we have good age representation, there's intrinsic value to knowing there's big bucks out there for hunters. If you're hunting in an area and you're like, man, this place is shot out. There's not even, what some of the what you take with you is the preparation, the dreaming, and the excitement about the possibility of getting one of these great bucks. And if you don't even have that, I mean, that really takes away from the experience of my mind. There's some people are perfectly happy shooting a little 2-point. Good on them. Well, we have all got our individual opinions and value sets. That's fine. I don't begrudge you for wanting to shoot a 2-point. Don't begrudge me for not shooting a deer for 10 years other than once and holding out for a good buck and wanting more quality.
Yeah. But for, I mean, I like, and at the individual level, I'm totally with you, Mike. Like, I don't begrudge somebody for shooting a young deer at all. Like, all this stuff is personal choice. But I do begrudge the management when we're managing places that historically the brand is for big deer, and we're managing them seems to be in a way to shoot 2 points. Like, that's nonsensical to me.
No.
And I
Do you remember on Colorado Parks and Wildlife hunting regulations? I think it was 3 years ago. They had a picture of a huge non-typical mule deer on the cover of their hunting regulations. Now, that being said, they know, whoever's putting that together knows that that's fostering this dream, this imagination. It's appealing to these people. Just like a year or two before that, this huge 7x7 bull elk bugling. So knowing that and knowing they understand, the psychology of hunters and wanting to apply for tags and everything, and they're presenting this image as like, this is the product for Colorado. This is why you're going to apply for this license. There's the potential for this dream to come true. When in reality, it's like, hey man, we've allocated so many tags that it's not. It's very, very unlikely, but it's like freaking hunting a unicorn with Bigfoot riding it. It's like it's a ridiculous thought I mean, even some of the auction tag bucks, you're seeing, some of these bucks being killed around towns near subdivisions and stuff, because that's the only place where some of these deer are getting old is in these refuges, close proximity to these small mountain towns. So, this all this stuff kind of ties together, and it's not just about trying to grow more trophy class bucks, but that's an easy trope for somebody has opposition to a more quality management style. They just say, you just want more big bucks so you can shoot more big deer. And that's an easy one for them. It's just like saying that, mountain lions, you're just hunting them for their hide and head. And, we know that's not true. It's a cheap shot is what it is. So I want quality mule deer herds in Colorado. I want a quality experience. And we're going too far. We're over hunting them. We can't police ourselves, Cliff, and you know that. The idea of hunters, having this collective mindset of hunters that we're only going to shoot certain age class deer, and you're going to try to save them and manage these public land bucks by not shooting them yourself. It's like, that doesn't work. Humans don't have the propensity to self-control like that. And that's why we have fish and game departments. So they can be the bad guy. They can save us from ourselves for overdoing it and that kind of thing. So, I have very strong opinions on this, and it doesn't have to do with me wanting to shoot more big bucks. I feel like the intrinsic value of these incredible deer on the landscape, whether you're driving down the road in the winter across the Gunnison Basin and see this giant buck out in the sagebrush, there's value to having these animals on the landscape, just like the wolf lovers feel like there's value to having wolves on the landscape. This is part of the big picture in my mind, is knowing those big bucks are out there is half of it for me. So I think that's I'm coming to.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Mike. I think that you could take somebody, like I've got friends who are purely what I would call meat hunters, and I hunt
Mhm.
with them all the time, good guys, like, and I view them as great hunters. Like, it's not about that, but I can take those guys. If we go mule deer hunting and we get lucky and we come over a ridge and it's like, middle November rut hunts, and just like one of these giant, majestic, thick-necked mule deer bucks stands up in like the morning light, even a guy who's meat hunted his whole life is gonna look at you and just be like, "Holy shit!" Like, not to be corny, dude, it'll like change you. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Because they are an insanely majestic animal, and we're talking about the places where they're the biggest. Like,
Yeah.
I can think of a half dozen moments in my life in terms of wildlife, Mike, where I was just astonished, and they're almost all big mule deer. And a lot of times they were mule deer that I didn't know were there.
Yes.
And they popped up in the mountains. It was like incredible. Like, I used to watch Eastman's and read hunting high country mule deer as a kid, and all the, I knew Popeye and all that stuff. I was obsessed with as a kid. And to see that in the wild is like, oh, I don't know. I don't know why it's so much different than elk to me, right? If I see a 360-inch bull elk or whatever, I'm like, yeah, that's a big elk. But like seeing these majestic mule deer pop up in the mountains is just will blow anybody away.
Yeah.
So yeah, just my
No,
experience, and I feel
I,
like there's
I have a story I think you can appreciate because you know this area well. But I had rented a horse from Sombrero Ranches up along the Colorado River near, I guess, pretty close to Burns there, where they got their little horse rental operation, and hauled it all the way over to Unit 40 by Grand Junction, where I was hunting over there, and helped my buddy kill a bull. And I was bringing the horse back to Sombrero, and I was traveling north of Dotsero along the Colorado River there. And you go up about a few miles, and you cross the first river bridge, so you're over on the east side of the river, and you're heading north, and there's a few little houses there in the sage flats there right along the river. And I came up over a rock, and there's a buck in my headlights, and it is the single biggest buck I've ever seen in my life. It's going across the road, angling away. And if I could just, I mean, having watched those Eastman's deer videos, if you remember the ones with a buck named King Crab, I don't know if you remember this deer, giant frame deer with cheaters, and that's what this buck was. Huge buck. He's mid 30s wide, and had huge, gigantic backs and like 3 or 4 cheaters coming off the back forks on each side. And he's going across the road in front of me about 40 yards ahead in the headlights. And it was just one of those things. I about drove off the road with my truck and a horse in the trailer at that moment, just trying to get an extra second or two in the headlights. But it was just one of those things I'll never forget my entire life. And I've got a few of those moments, and you know, and you think about what that does to your imagination, spurring your imagination, thinking in the off season of thinking about that big buck and where he might have found his hidey hole and where he's hiding out, and picturing him, laying underneath a juniper, and in the second season he's already dropped down in the low country because he's getting away from all the hunting pressure up in the Quakies, and all that kind of stuff. That is really important stuff for people, and I think it adds to the quality of experience we have out there in the mountains. And knowing that there's big mule deer out there is, I think it's a big deal for hunters, and knowing that. And so you may not want to kill a big buck, but knowing that they're there, I think we all could agree that it's kind of a big deal to have good age class representation in our mule deer herds in Colorado. And if we don't, what are we doing wrong? Let's ask the hard questions. Do we need, is this, we're already at a point where our hunting licenses are oversubscribed, and it's harder and harder to get quality mule deer licenses in Colorado. It's one of those things. It's a supply and demand. And there's just not enough for everybody, and that awareness is people just have to accept that we all can't do what we want to do every year, even though we did in the past, or we might have done it every other year. Moving forward, it doesn't work anymore, and it's at the expense and peril of our resource, this great animal, this mule deer. So I urge people to have an open mind and be conservative in their hunting. When it comes to mule deer, I don't think everybody needs to take a buck home just because you got a tag in your pocket. It's I make those choices, and I think, it's an individual choice. It's your value set, but be comfortable with the idea of going home empty-handed, knowing that you're doing the right thing, maybe for the future.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And then also if you want to have a selfish angle on it too, it's hard to kill big ones if you kill small ones. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean?
Yep.
Just within an individual hunt. So that's another way to think about it. But on that, Mike, like tactical advice. I'm a newer mule deer hunter. Like this is on my bucket list. I have several viewers that I interact with fairly often, Mike, who they only want to hunt mule deer. They're very focused on that, and they want to eventually shoot a big one. What would be your plan of attack or advice to a guy like that?
Time and local knowledge. It's like you need to learn an area and stick with it. And what that means is you might not hunt it very many times, and you have to invest the time into scouting, learning, uh, and sometimes it might mean, you know, getting a cow elk tag and hunting there, or it might mean getting a bear tag. Bear tags are just ridiculously easy to get in Colorado. It's you can hunt. There's so many B list and C list tags available that you can hunt a lot of bears. I've talked to a lot of people that hunt archery season. They see more bears and moose than elk and deer, and it's not because there's more bear, but because of how we've impacted these elk and deer herds with the pressure we've put on them is why they're seeing more bears and moose. So I would say, doing things like that. I just wrote an article for Western Hunter magazine. It's going to print this week, and it's kind of laying out some of this stuff. Thinking outside the box. If you go to a trailhead and there's 20 cars there, I guess this plays into "Find Another Trailhead Dummy," the quote from Rogan and Cam Haynes' podcast. But I get what they're saying. But if you're going to a trailhead and you see all those vehicles there, and you expect to walk 2 miles and have a quality experience, whose fault is that? And so you need to think outside the box and advocate for yourself. And one of the things I've seen is people are unwilling to put the hard yards in to separate themselves. And so it doesn't just distance doesn't create isolation for hunters. It's being creative at this. It's looking for a way to get in there where you're walking across a pinyon and juniper covered mesa top and dropping into a canyon, as opposed to going up the canyon bottom road a couple miles away and hunting your way up into it. It's think about the way you access things and develop that local knowledge, and that is a really important. And hunt deer where they are. You can't hunt deer where. I used to have this really big misconception. It was driven by Kurt Darner's book, which I got as a teenage kid and I was reading. But down there in some of that pinyon juniper country, expecting to find these ghost bucks. I mean, you're pissing in the wind. They're just not there in a lot. And you look at like an area like Kanab, Utah, that has all these deer that come off the top of up by the Heaton Ranch and all that, and they get down there in that pinyon juniper country when it's rifle season, just from a seasonal migration shift. But there's a lot of places in Colorado where you'll never see bucks like that down in the pinyon juniper. They just don't go in there, and so no, you can't hunt them where they're not at. And so that's really important, and you got to be able to see them too. So the idea of still hunting dark timber for big mule deer is that's a fool's game as far as I'm concerned. You can, that you see a lot of stuff on advice from people on social media. What do I need to do? Glass, 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 glass. Well, that's great as long as you're glassing in a place that has deer living in it. And you glass your ass off in some places and there's nothing there. So you got to have the awareness and skill set to find these spots where the deer are going to, and understanding mule deer as a species, understanding individual areas, because like Colorado and the Book Cliffs, that's all oak brush and Douglas fir and some of that stuff up top. And by the time the third rifle season rolls around, those deer are pretty much off that. Even though there's not enough snow to drive them off, they have a seasonal movement up there where these bucks and does bail off some of this stuff. Then you go up to Middle Park, Summit County, where I used to live up north of Silverthorne. You'll have bucks and does up in the Quakies and spruce until December. And a lot of these bucks won't even drop on to winter range until after Christmas. So, Knowing that local knowledge is what I'm kind of getting at right there, and understanding what those deer are doing different times a year. And the only way you're going to get that is by spending time. So you have to have a long-term game plan for hunt. It's not like the old days where you just draw, in the early 2000s where you just draw tags and go, hunt hard and do all the right stuff, good tactics and everything, and come out with it just doesn't work that way anymore. So knowing there's less bucks, more pressure, you're going to have to be creative and outthink other people, not just out hike them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, and that aligns with a lot of what I have seen. And I don't know what me and you haven't talked about, how you've hunted in the past before, but a lot of the deer that we killed, Mike, were for sure on movement corridors,
Yep.
that we figured out over the years, and very consistent where we over the years we would kill the bulk of our bucks. And it's interesting because one thing I noticed is that it's kind of like this, it'd be the same deer we're moving on the same trail year to year, or the same hillside, maybe a set of 5 trails, but literally a set of 5 trails. I'd know hey, I saw these bucks come through this exact same way the year before. And where I noticed it a lot is if we got really perfect conditions during the middle of a rifle season and we just wiped them out. We killed 8 bucks on the hillside,
right?
They would be toast for several years. And the reason I mention this is because I think finding the little nooks and crannies, even in a world that you're saying there's less big mule deer, if you can find where some of these deer are moving that other people don't know about, that's kind of your best bet to kill a big one. One that's gotten through he's gotten through the whole war zone several years. It's because he's coming through a certain spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we're in a different era than we were 15, 20 years ago, and just people have to understand that and adapt to it. The idea of a lot. I know a lot of the really talented and avid mule deer hunters in the West and in Colorado. And these guys don't consistently kill big bucks anymore. And there's an element of luck also with people but even if you do everything right, use all the right tactics, gear, equipment, and all that, there's still an element of you have to cross paths with a low density animal in a heavily hunted area. I mean, how many big bucks are in that unit? The idea of you crossing paths with them, being within rifle range, and finding that deer, the odds are low. And understanding that is important. That's being real. We can be optimistic and say all the right things, but you have to be real about what the situation. The odds are stacked against you. Understanding that. So whatever you need to do, you have to spend more time. You have to work a little harder. You can't take days off. It's simple. Killing big animals is simply about putting in the time. Eventually, you're gonna, get lucky, cross paths with one. There's an element of luck to a lot of the big deer I killed, simply by me happening to be on the same mountain as they were, even not knowing that they were there, but yet digging them up. So the odds of that, and that was in the heyday of Colorado mule deer hunting in the early 2000s. So the last buck I killed was over near Saguache, and it's, units that have gotten a lot of notoriety and press, but in essence, they've been hunted out at this point. That the quality of deer hunting over there has dropped. I had a deer tag over there, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it was, and I killed the biggest deer that anybody I'd been in touch with or seen or knew over there killed that year, and it was, simply about. I just was grinding it out and being out there every day. And eventually I ran into this buck right before dark on, it was the second to last day of the season. So,
yeah. How many of those big deer that you killed, Mike, had you pre-scouted or you knew were there?
Probably not many of them. Just, my biggest deer, I actually knew he was there, but I didn't pre-scout him. I found him on opening day, but I found him through glass at a distance. But then once I'd seen him, in fact, it's the one on the wall behind me up there. That's a European mount of them.
Oh, okay. The big typical.
Yep. 38 and a half wide and 208 and 5/8 net. And I think it's the third largest deer entered in Boone and Crockett since 1974 in Colorado for typicals. So yeah, I found him, but once I saw him, I dedicated myself to getting him killed, and so that was. But when you're hunting transition, quite often in the rifle hunts, you're hunting transition zones, so you can't really do really effective pre-scouting for the most part because what you're talking about is deer moving into an area at a certain time of year versus a archery hunt in September when you have all summer to scout and bucks are basically been in the same basin for 2 months or at least a month and until they rub their velvet they're pretty well locked in their day-to-day activity. So it's a big advantage scouting for the early season hunters. That's why with the later rifle hunts local knowledge is important because pre-scouting isn't as effective because the deer are moving in there. So what you might go there 2 weeks earlier, there's no deer in there. And a week and a half later, there's a foot and a half of snow above 12,000 feet. And you've had deer start pouring into there just simply by the time of year and what they're doing. So understanding what deer do in certain areas, how they move, where they move into, what they like to be in, all that is really important. That's the local knowledge that you develop by consistently hunting a place time after time. And when you talk about the locals giving you information, they'll give you information on what the deer do. Nobody's going to give you a honey hole or a hot tip. For one, there aren't many of them around anymore. But people are pretty forthright with giving you information about general information like when do the deer start moving into this country or that kind of thing. And that's super valuable information. And I don't think a lot of people really think about it that way. So there's got to be a new approach to hunting mule deer in this day and age. And I hope that I'm not rambling too much by trying to explain this. And what are the important things you need to take in the field? Be creative, be smart, and develop that local knowledge. So think about your access points. Think about where the deer are going to be. What are they looking for? What do they want to eat? The does start gathering in certain areas. Bucks are going to be on the fringe. Quite often, early November, bucks will be up in heavy cover near some of those does. And what they'll do is they'll come down at night and you'll see their tracks if there's any snow. Well, they'll come down and just kind of make some rounds at night. But before it's even light, they're back in heavy cover because they haven't lost their natural hairiness yet. Not enough hormones surging through their system and they haven't gotten ruddy yet. So mule deer don't really, as you well know, mule deer really don't rut very heavily until after November 10th. So I've always felt like the 20th to the 25th is the peak of the rut, and it plays out usually year after year. And the further north you go in North America, it's earlier. The further south you go, it's later. But I'm just talking about Colorado in the middle of the central Rockies. It's pretty well around the 20th to the 25th of November is when the peak of the rut is.
Right. Yeah, and that's the same thing that I saw. Like those seasons that we were hunting, into Thanksgiving, 26th or whatever, those were usually like they were rutting hard by then, and then I was around them after the season a lot, just from logistics and closing up shop and everything, and I would notice it kind of tapering off. I think there's that, not that it matters from a tactics or planning perspective, but I think there's a little bit of a at least in the deer that I observed, there's a little bit of a myth that like, oh, after the hunting season, they really get going. And I noticed that, when later dates were there, the peak was during hunting season. They would literally tail off that, first week of December. You'd see less activity just around. But it's really interesting to hear your perspective on scouting and that sort of thing. The biggest deer that I was ever involved in killing, never saw him before. And I was in the area, we killed him all the time. For years. I never saw him before. It was just somebody, you could totally call it luck. I'm going to chalk it up to that we kind of knew where to sit. You know what I mean, Mike? Like that was a big, I knew, we knew when deer were going to move through there and that sort of thing, but I'd never seen them before. And I noticed that particularly Colorado mountains, a lot of the people I talk to, because I know you score for Boone and Crockett, right, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah.
I try not.
Sorry, what's that?
I said I try not to, but I end up doing some of it. So
Yeah. And when I was an Eagle, I scored for him too. And I would talk to a lot of people who have, they were snowcat drivers or whatever, and I had scored multiple giant deer for him over the years. Nobody knew about them. This was just like the one hobby that they did in their time off, and almost all of them mirrored exactly what you said. They just knew a certain area, and a lot of them, Mike, were killing big bucks. Like they might kill a buck one year and then not kill another one for 5 years, but they'd both be giant bucks, and they'd be sitting on the same rock when they killed it. You know,
sure, yeah, yeah. And
it's
there's
very, very interesting.
yeah, there's things about certain habitats that mule deer are drawn to, and like locales or whatever. They just find these for whatever reason a combination of qualities appeals to this little section of the mountain that they gravitate towards, and you'll see it play out year after year. Same thing with bighorn sheep. This you'll find rams in the same places that they killed rams 20, 30 years ago. And, some of that knowledge is passed on from, younger rams joining the ram group and kind of developing that knowledge that they carry with them. But, there's also things about the habitat that mule deer are attracted to. And whether it's the cover, it's a combination of a lot of stuff, food cover, and they don't like people. So they don't like, if the idea of they're going to be in a spot and they're going to get bumped all the time, they're not going to be there anymore. They'll quit going there. Like bull elk, you'll never, if you bump a bull elk out of a spot, rarely will you ever find him there again. He's already figured out, like, I'm not coming here anymore. This is too dangerous. I think it's certainly true to maybe to a lesser extent with mule deer. I don't feel like mule deer, I think from an intelligence standpoint, I think bull elk are more intelligent. I think they evaluate things and they make decisions, actively make decisions. I think some of these bulls do, and it's pretty interesting when you compare. Animals rely on their natural instincts of how they deal with, just like whitetails. Maybe not whitetails are super smart, but they're very furtive, and so there's that tendency for them to be just more cover prone and hide, and they run from danger. Elk use distance to create safety. Mule deer don't always do that. Mule deer run down through a quaky patch, hook around a hillside, and go drop down into a bed, and hopefully danger is past them at that point. But elk will go 2 units over.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's what's interesting about each species has a different kind of defense mechanism, right? And then, well, I know in the last few years you've mountain goat hunted, and I used to guide a ton of mountain goat hunts there, and it's weird. Like people will call mountain goats stupid, and they get habituated to people, and so in that case they are kind of stupid. But I would be up in some very remote area hunting mountain goats, and I never observed them as stupid, Mike. It was just that their instincts are like, oh, danger. Let me climb this rock where danger can't get me.
Sure.
Obviously, a rifle, or a bow, having said that, like, that tears that down, and they look stupid. But they're not stupid. It's just that's their mechanism,
No, and when you talk about being human habituated in some of these areas with lots of people climbing 14ers or whatever, like over by Brecken, some of those goats are very habituated there. And I would say, if anything, they're smarter. They've figured out, hey, these people can give us some cool snacks, so we're going to hang out with them and get some Cheez-Its or whatever on the trail. So that's actually pretty smart. And then you look at like some of the billies, and when they get spooked, they climb up into the crags, and there's that too. So all animals, even caribou. Caribou are pretty much labeled as the dumbest animal going, but I wouldn't say they're stupid at all. They're just relying on their natural instincts of what they're a herd animal, and they use distance for safety. And so when they're spooked, they gather up in a tight herd, because wolves can't single out herd animals as well as a single animal, and they just start moving off. So understanding wildlife and animals, I think that's a pretty important quality to have for adult onset hunter. And you're not just getting your rifle and sighting it in. You need to learn the animal. You need to learn the habitat. There's a lot that goes into hunting. And if somebody asks you, where do you start? I mean, that's almost a really difficult question for guys like us to answer. It's like, okay, let me think about this. Where do you start? I mean, like, because this is a lifestyle and a mindset we've carried with us since we were teenagers, basically. And it's like, how do you go back in time and well, the big thing is being motivated to want to be successful, finding a mentor, and which sounds kind of odd, especially for grown men, but it is and your mentor doesn't need to be somebody 20 years older, like a father figure. Your mentor, a hunting mentor, could be a guy 10 years younger than you, a guy that's really good at what he does. If you're on a guided hunt, learning from this kid that knows what the hell there's some stone cold killers out there, some of these young guys, because they're so driven. And, because, we talked about in our email about, a lot of your audience is adult onset hunters. And I think that's, there's a lot that goes into this. Hunting isn't easy, and it can be, but generally speaking, it's not. Killing an elk is very, very difficult at this day and age. And so, it's a dedication. It's a learning the craft, learning a lot of things, and there's so many intangibles that go along with it too. There's things I don't even think about anymore. But one of the biggest things I wrote an article for Western Hunter this last summer about mule deer sense of smell. You can fool their eyes, you can fool their ears, but you can't fool their nose. And that goes with elk or anything else. And that's something a lot of people just don't think of actively is the wind. And I mean, I subconsciously am always monitoring. If I feel the wind switch, I mean, I pick up on it instantly if I feel it change. And not everybody's that way. And how did I get that way? Well, lots of trial and error, lots of times feeling stupid, like God dang it, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have went up the canyon. I shouldn't have came over the ridge that way. I should have known better. I should have known that as soon as the sun lit up that hillside, the air currents are going to start going up immediately. So hunting isn't easy, but one thing cool about it, the fact that it's not easy means not everybody can do it. And so, don't be a rifle hiker, be a hunter.
Right. And I think you're hitting on something, Mike, that I think for better or worse is a part of hunting, and it's somewhat unique to it as an activity nowadays. It's just time. Yeah, I feel bad because I just tell people over and over that who are frustrated, like it's a time thing. You have to be in the field, and you can't compare yourself. I don't know what your background was as a kid, but it's not fair for somebody to compare themselves to me or somebody else who I was blessed. I hunted since I was 12 years old, man. Like a lot of this stuff it's just, you've kind of ingrained it. And like you say, you don't even know you're doing it. So you can't be 35 years old, start hunting and start comparing yourself to people who already have their 10,000 hours, like in the activity. It's an activity that, I'd love to hear comments on this, that even if you have millions of dollars in the bank, in order to actually get good at it, that doesn't matter. You still have to go. You still have to go, and you still have to be in the field a bunch. You know what I mean? It helps if you got a bunch of money because you can pay out for awesome hunts and you can be in the field a lot. It's a massive bonus. And some of the best hunters I know are exactly that. But there's really no shortcut of just iterating on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and when you talk about doing that and gaining the knowledge, the skill set, and all that, when you're gathering preference points for 25 years and you got a stack of them and you're waiting to draw that 44, but you haven't deer hunted in 15, 20 years because you're waiting to draw. It's like, and you go into the field without a polished set of skills and knowledge and all that. It's like you're kind of handicapping. Well, not kind of. You're handicapping yourself. And hunting it's a skill. It's probably you could say there's an element that's a perishable skill too. So, if you don't have the drive and ability, you just have, it's something you have to do. Guides become better hunters simply by the fact that they're doing it all the time and they're learning from their hunters' mistakes. And so a lot of people don't have an interest in getting better. They're perfectly comfortable with having that guided hunt and having their hand held and looking at their phone all day while their guide glasses for deer. And So if that guy has been sitting on points for 25 years and he doesn't kill a buck because he wasn't becoming a better hunter that whole time, I don't really think anyone should feel sorry for that. There's people that, apply themselves, when I don't say apply, I mean, they apply themselves to learning the craft and becoming a better hunter, and not just applying for tags. That's kind of the point I'm making.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Local,
absolutely, man. And that's yeah. The local, like all that stuff plays in. But the other thing is, Mike, is that like that to me, that's part of the fun, man.
yes,
You know,
yeah,
and I think it's interesting because in my mind, you're known for big mule deer, but me and you share this, that we kind of appreciate jumping around to other species too.
I,
Not everybody's like that, but for me, that's part of the fun.
yeah, yeah. I chase adventure, and I love hunting other things. I really become fond of hunting moose, Shiras moose in Colorado, and I just think it's a kick, man. There's there it's amazing because you'll see these big bulls in the summer, and they're big bulls in velvet out in the open, and man, once they rub their velvet, it's a different animal, and it's just a really fun hunting experience. I drew my tag in 2014 and killed a big bull up in the Gore Range, and it's and after that, I've been in on, I don't know, maybe half a dozen big moose being killed, and helped my buddy kill the Pope and Young world record Shiras out of Colorado, and it was a moose I found scouting, and he left the unit that I had a tag for, went into the next neighboring unit, and so I couldn't hunt him anymore. But I had my buddy put in for that tag, and he drew it the next year, and we ended up killing that bull. So I've really enjoyed helping people with their moose hunts, and it's all fun until you get one on the ground, and the fun ends. So,
They're a lot of work, man.
yeah.
Dude, we've been on for an hour and 40 minutes. I got one question for you, and then I'll let you go, Mike, if you got time for it. And it's along the lines of what you just talked about. I feel like, watching your social media stuff over the years, a lot of the hunts that you get to experience are not you hunting. It's helping friends. And I think that is, in my mind, a very underrated way to get exposure. Like, it could be friends or kids. Like, one recommendation I tell late onset hunters, like if a 35-year-old guy hits me up and he's like, I'm having a hard time finding hunts that are good quality. I'm like, do you got kids? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I got a 13, 14-year-old kid. And I'm like, look, there's this youth program, like, get these kids cow tags or whatever and go out and kill a cow with them. Like, that's your best exposure, and it's easy,
Yeah.
And I feel it's analogous to, going on these epic hunts with friends. What's your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, it's you do it because you enjoy it. I mean, that's why I do it. I really enjoy the experience. When I was younger, I was perfectly fine being out there alone. Still am, but I enjoy the camaraderie of friends and other people in the hunt anymore. And I enjoy mentoring my daughter and watching her become the hunter she is. My wife enjoys it. She came from a hunting family, and she's not ate up with it like I am, but she'll go and she enjoys it. And so I get that too. I've got some really good friends that I enjoy going with, but no, it's you do it because you want to, and if it's not something you're interested in, well, so be it. But I enjoy the experience. I enjoy the camaraderie. There's a lot of bonding that occurs. I've said this about sheep hunting: friends made on the mountain are friends for life, and it's true, because when you go on a guided sheep hunt and you spent 10 days to 2 weeks in a tent with a guy, yeah, as long as you're not both assholes, then you come away from it with a lot of camaraderie. That's laying in your sleeping bags, telling stories on rainy days, and that kind of thing. There's a bonding that occurs in the outdoors that's super valuable, and it's something I really enjoy. And the pursuit of adventure at this point, because it's not simply about the pursuit of big bucks or anything else. I really enjoy the experience. That's why I'm going to Tanzania. I want that. I mean, I read Peter Capstick's book as a kid, and really just became enamored with that whole Africa hunting experience. And I want to go have that kind of thing. So I went to Australia and hunted water buffalo in June with a good friend, and doing this Africa thing again. Been to South Africa twice, and It's a great experience. But it's not Tanzania, it's not Zambia, it's not Botswana, it's South Africa. And, you take it for what it is. But in Colorado, I've been really fortunate to draw every tag that you can get at this point, and so um, yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. I lived in Summit County up north of Silverthorne for, oh geez, it was, I think, close to 20 years, 23. But in the hunting the Gore Range and hiking in the Gore Range and being there many, many days I've just spent in. So when you look at what I did in my time living up in Summit County, I killed, and I'm not necessarily trying to kill Boone and Crockett animals, but what I'm saying is my local knowledge, I killed a Boone and Crockett Shiras, mule deer, bighorn sheep, and a mountain goat that missed Boone and Crockett because he had a broken tip. And I killed a mountain lion without dogs up there, and a giant bull elk. And this is a heavily hunted public land. And it's not because of anything other than my local knowledge and my drive and my desire and to be willing to pass up smaller animals to do that. So, my value sets, my skill sets all played into this. And so it's not for everybody. And I'm not trying to brag, but I'm saying that there's a lot of value to putting the time in, enjoying the experience, getting the knowledge and all that. It's a way of life for me. It's not just a hobby. And so yeah, and I think that it's the same with a lot of hunters. It's, I'm a hunter. It's not like saying I'm a golfer. Those are different things in my mind.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. No, I think with most the hunters I know, man, it's very much that way, Mike.
yeah,
That it's like it's a fun, even new. I mean, there's guys that have only been hunting for 3 years, and it been very impactful on their entire lifestyle, right? It's
yeah,
it becomes their dominant hobby, which I think is awesome. I personally think even to reflect on what you said about camaraderie, I mean, there's guys that I've guided on a 4-day backpack goat hunt that I guided them 5 years ago, and if I saw him walking down the street, like I'd literally run over there and give him a hug, and that's
yep,
only 4 days of my life I've spent with the guy. You know what
yeah,
I mean? But
yeah,
it's a different type of camaraderie that builds up that's huge. I think uh, it's something that's lacking personally. I think in a lot of just like for our culture right now within men, there's not a whole lot of that for a lot of guys. They're
no,
walking this earth like very much, they don't have much access to that. So hunting brings it back to them, and then all the other benefits. So to me, it's amazing to me that it can be transformational to so many guys. It's very cool that way.
yes, it is. And so, like what I said about friends made on the mountain or friends for life, these are, some of this experience or some of these bonds are created by the experience of facing adversity together, the weather, the mountains, and doing that, the shared difficulty of climbing up in fog and rain after a dull sheep ram, and having that come to fruition and getting around. I mean, these are transformational experiences for some people. Some people never do it again, and other people it changes their life. And we could go on with stories about that, but I'm just saying that it's a special thing to share the bond of the mountain with people, and it just really brings people closer. And it's good that not everybody can experience this because the world's not big enough for it. But it's sad that not everybody can. And so, one thing before we wrap it up, you when you in your email you asked me about gear, the most underrated and overrated, and I was just going to give you mine. So, I think the most overrated gear is a pack. Like there's lots of packs out there, and I haven't worn one yet that made a 70-pound elk quarter feel like it weighs less than 70 pounds. Now there's a little more comfort. I get it. But what I'm saying is, man, there's a lot of good packs out there. Don't worry about it. Just get yourself a quality pack from a quality manufacturer. And I think a good down puffy is one of the most underrated pieces of gear. And I had one that I got in the Cabela's bargain room. Oh shit, 25 years ago, and it was cheap. It was not the greatest quality down, but it packed to the size of a football, and I always threw it in my pack. And it finally got ripped and torn, and I threw it away. I haven't replaced it, but I've been wearing like the Kuiu down puffies and stuff like that. But that's not the same. like a good quality, heavier weight down puffy is super important, just to throw it on over everything. And, not just like the Kuiu stuff's a technical layer of down. It's an insulating. It's not like sitting in camp when it's cool and throwing on your down puffy. I think it's a great piece of gear for guys to have late season. I think everybody should have a down puffy in their pack when they're sitting on a glassing spot and getting cold and all that. Just having one of those with you is a really good piece of equipment.
Do,
All the cool layers.
do you know? Sorry, Mike. Do you know what the brand? Do you know what the brand is that you use,
Oh,
or what the
right now,
model is?
I don't have to get another. I need to get another one, that like a bigger oversized. I've got a picture of me on a doll sheep hunt. I look like the Michelin Man, like this big, huge down puffy that went over the top of everything. It was just a uh, Cabela's own
Yeah,
brand.
yeah. I
And,
got you. So
and
almost like a parka level puffy, and I have the same. I have the
yeah,
same thing, and I agree with
and
you.
they're great just to have one of those in your pack. And I really think that's a good thing. And also, the other thing that's I don't think anybody should be hunting without merino wool for an insulation. You say what you want about the synthetic, that merino wool against your skin, even if it's the thinner stuff, just to have that for your base layer, and going with a heavier synthetic layer on top of that if you have to. But merino wool and a down puffy is probably the more underrated things as far as gear out there, because what they both allow you to do is spend more time in uncomfortable situations, and it's pretty freaking hard to be mentally tough when you're freezing your ass off.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And,
That's
and I'm the same way. I'm the same way with the merino base layers. I don't do any synthetics anymore. Mike,
yeah.
just they're better.
So if you're not
Yeah,
doing
merino's
both of
better.
those things in your hunting late season, just like I said, it's hard to be mentally tough when you're freezing your ass off, and that down puffy could be a lifesaver too. So that's what I think is most underrated and overrated. So um, take that for what
Yeah.
it's worth.
On the down. Yeah, for sure. On the down puffy, Mike, do you keep it in a dry bag or anything, or you just stick it down deep in your bag where it's not going to get wet?
I used to not put it in anything. Now I put it in a little tiny dry bag, and I have like my Kuiu down layers. I have this bright orange little folding dry bag, and I put both my Kuiu top and bottom in that, and I keep it dry for a reason. I mean, down doesn't work when it's wet, so it could be your
Right.
life.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
yeah. If you have to spend a night out and you have that in your pack, like that could be the difference for sure.
yeah.
I totally agree with you, man.
And I
That
know
yeah.
one thing I also do. I carry, those Z-Rest folding pads for backpacking, like the folding accordion style backpacking sleeping pad. I carry a full length one with me hunting all the time now. And whether I'm scouting or hunting, I just strap it. They don't weigh much at all. I mean, I can't imagine they weigh more than a pound. They're very lightweight. But just using it as a sitting pad to keep your butt from getting wet, or even during the middle of the day to stretch out on that thing instead of laying in the dirt, and put your head on your pack and be stretched out on that. It's a super comfortable, and having comfort while you're out in the hills is important too. And so I think that's a really good thing that I like. I'm a big fan of trekking poles. I don't go anywhere without them anymore. Um, if you're hunting in sagebrush, obviously it's not optimal, but yeah, I'm a big fan. I think trekking poles are a 1.3 multiplier. I mean, they give you, I think, about that extra 30. And I don't understand why anybody over the age of 30 doesn't use them. I get it if you're 20, but
Yeah, dude. My only regret with trekking poles is that I didn't start using them earlier. You
same
know what I
here.
mean?
Yeah,
I think they
Steve.
would have. I think they would have saved me some knee issues.
Yeah, Steve Johnson. He was an outfitter guide in Alaska. He passed away last winter prematurely. But I went on my first dull hunt with Steve, and he says, "Do you got tracking poles?" I said, "Yeah, I don't use them very much, but I've got them." This was 2007, and he said, "Well, start using them, get used to them because you're not coming without them." And I can see why.
Yeah,
After
sure.
I got addicted to them. I love them. It's also when you're hiking. Sometimes your hands are hanging low and your knuckles get a little swollen after a day of hiking a lot. And when you're grabbing the trekking poles and working your arms, it keeps your hands from getting a little swollen too. And people that are 20 probably don't know what we're talking about, but you do.
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
the elevation.
yeah, you just
Yeah,
using your arms.
I mean, if I right, if I'm packing out meat, Mike, I use my trekking pole every step,
Yep.
every single step. I use my poles.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You know,
think,
it's become fundamental how I move around.
yeah. Yeah. It's almost a crutch for me. Well, not almost, it is a crutch. I mean, figuratively and literally that, I love them. I can't see hiking in the high mountains without them. They just give you extra. So,
Sure. Do you
yeah.
happen to know what kind you use?
Yeah. I've got the, black diamond carbon cork.
Oh, okay.
I
Gotcha.
like I like the cork handles, just
Yeah.
the way they feel on your hands. I also, when I've got trekking poles, like when I'm going downhill, I tend to palm the top of the pole
Yeah, I same thing.
in front of me. But what that tends to do too is you can get blisters on the palms of your hands from doing that if you're going heavyweight a long time. So like those lightweight mechanics gloves, I usually have a pair of those with me, and using those with trekking poles works quite well. And the cork handles, I think, are far superior to the black rubber handles. So I would suggest people go towards those. Mine are carbon fiber, cork handled black diamond. It's the top of the line ones are pretty expensive, but you can get really good quality trekking poles at Costco for a reasonable price. I'm sure they're made in China and all
Yeah,
that,
and it
but they're good. They're
yep.
good.
And
For the,
I use yeah, and I use those ones like they're like Cascade or something like
yeah,
that. And
exactly.
they're the Costco ones, and same deal, corks. I think they make some carbon fiber ones too. I don't know if right now I've got aluminum or the other one, but I use that brand, and it's great. It's interesting though what you say about gloves, Mike, and it's an interesting point because for years when I was only using one pole, I used to have a whippet. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like an extendable ice axe. And
Yeah,
the only reason I liked it is because I could turn that handle sideways and I'd grip it on the top and I could
yeah,
push, you know. Um, I wish that, well, I shouldn't say that. I think now that I've gotten used to using normal trekking poles, I probably would just go with that still. But, because if you have the handles, it's like another, kind of makes them less streamlined just to
yeah,
put on your pack and shit like that. But that dynamic, I do the same thing. It's funny, like literally putting top weight on the pole.
yeah. Another thing is learning how to use the trekking poles with those straps. And so, the trekking poles have a loop strap. And so when you grab the trekking pole handle, you got to go up through the loop strap and grab the handle that way. And so when you're pushing off with your arms and your hands, I'm probably telling you something you already know. You have that strap on your wrist. And what it does is it alleviates the pressure on your grip strength when you're using trekking poles because you have the ability to push with your arm and utilize your tricep and your shoulder when you're pushing off instead of relying on a lot of grip strength to transfer into that pole. So if you take the loop, put your hand in through the bottom and grab the trekking pole handle, that works pretty well for climbing, going uphill to allow your wrist to bear down on the strap when you're climbing. And not everybody knows how to utilize them properly. And I didn't do it right for a long time and watched this video and I'm like, oh, geez, I'm a dumbass. I should have figured this out a long time ago.
Yeah, no, and I do that, Mike. But I think it's a really good point, and people that listen to this love that kind of stuff. And so you may do it different, and tell me if I'm explaining it. But how I do is I go up through the loop, and then the loop of the trekking pole tends to actually be in my palm. It doesn't
Okay.
necessarily have to be, but I push it against the pole that way, and then I do the same thing. As I use the pole, I'll literally have pressure on the base of my wrist. Is this
Yeah.
what you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Same idea. But if you're not doing that, it does make a difference,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah.
So
And I
great
think
tip, man.
you're seeing more people use trekking poles, but I think there's a lot of older guys that don't use them for whatever damn reason. I have no idea. But I mean, they're super helpful. I mean, it really does. It's not about being weak or anything like that. It's about giving yourself an extra and being able to utilize your arms and a little bit and take pressure off your legs is really important. And shortening and lengthening your trekking poles according to climbing or descending is really important too. So, adjusting them on the fly, and not everybody does that. They just set them for the neutral position of the 90-degree standing straight up. And so, I lengthen mine when I'm going downhill so I can reach out in front of me and plant that trekking pole, and I have it impacting into the palm of my hand. I'm like grasping the top of the pole and working it that way. And that's why I use gloves, because I'll get a blister like that going downhill with a heavy pack if I'm just palming the top of the trekking poles that way. So,
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
yeah,
And that's what I noticed too, Mike. A guy who's really efficient at using them in varied terrain, he'll change the level of them almost constantly.
yeah,
It's not unusual to want to change the length of them, over and over. That's pretty typical if you're using them right. You know what I mean? So that's a great tip too.
yeah,
Um, it's funny. I guess what I would say about them is it's kind of like hearing protection, right? There's moments in my life where I had a hunter shoot next to me with like a muzzle brake, and I think that one individual situation like affected my hearing
yeah,
potentially a little bit for life.
sure.
I think there are situations where I was packing way heavy of a pack, like we were trying to get out of some hell in one run, and I didn't have trekking poles. In that single situation, did damage, like permanent damage to my body. That
Absolutely.
that's how I feel about trekking poles. Is that like literally you should use them with that mindset that like if you get tons of weight, if you're not using them, you might be doing irreversible damage to some of your joints. It
Yeah.
might sound extreme, but I do believe that.
No, and stuff like crossing little creeks late season, where you got ice on the side of the creek and a little bit of ice on rocks and stuff like that, and just having more points of purchase. One fall in an icy creek is, you could hit your lower back or what, it might end your hunt. And so just, those little things are, those are the things we've learned from many years of doing this. And, these are hot tips to pass on to people. But, like I said, I'm a big fan of trekking poles, and I know we're running long on time here, but the other question you said, what sets good hunters apart from the average hunter? You said you wanted to wrap that up with. So I think the number one thing is time, and good hunters are willing to dedicate and use the time. And 2 days into a hunt, they're not getting homesick and wanting to go home. They're putting the time in. And well, people have often asked me about hunting, in the past, as far as like when the third season of Colorado was 9 days long and that kind of thing. And I said, if you're going to miss any days at all, don't miss the end. Miss the beginning, miss the opening day. Big damn deal. The only time you might want to not miss the opening day crush is first rifle elk season, opening day, opening morning, as we know that probably at least half the elk that are killed in the first rifle elk season are killed in that first hour of the first day. And you know that's about it. Other than that, it's like you need to put time in. The good hunters put time in, and they pass animals up, and they put their time in. They hunt smart. But it's time kills big animals. Jason Carter and I had this discussion once on a podcast. There's no question. So, and if time kills big animals, it's going to work wonders on your average mule deer.
Yeah,
So
sure. Well,
yeah,
absolutely, man. And I think those are great points.
yeah.
Mike, dude, I greatly appreciate it. I stole 2 hours of your time. I think there's tons of good stuff in here. Let people know where they can follow you. And I know you've got a book too. So, I'll stick the link in the description of the YouTube video and on the podcast so people can look it up. But go ahead and let people know where they can keep
Yeah,
track of you.
my name's on Instagram, and it's just common spelling of what you can see on the screen right there, so I can be found that way. And then I do write for Western Hunter magazine. We're going on. I did some writing for Trophy Hunter and Eastman's and Mule Deer Foundation back in the day a little bit, but the only thing I do really at this point is Western Hunter. I had my first article published in Sports Afield, which was kind of an ego stroke on kudu hunting, so that was kind of fun this year. Yeah, and I did co-author a book with David Long, formerly of Eastman's fame, and it's called The Edge: Guide to Hunting Mountain Mule Deer. And even if you're not a trophy hunter, if you're just learning, wanting to learn skills, and this is information that can be taken across all mountain animals as far as how to go about it, whether it's bighorn sheep or bull elk or whatever. There's a lot of good information in that book, and there's something about the written word that sticks with people, and it's something you can reflect on and reinforce by going back and visiting the book. I'm not just trying to sell a book. I'm just saying that a lot of people have resorted to simply watching podcasts and YouTube videos, and I don't think the human brain acquires the knowledge and stores it in the same way as reading. And so a lot of people don't want to or don't take the time to read, which is fine. But I'm saying that there's a lot of value to reading some of this stuff, and the book's available from westernhunter.net. So
Awesome.
if you're interested,
Yeah.
that's
Go
about
check
it.
it out. Sounds good, man. Thanks,
Yeah.
Mike. Well, dude,
Yeah.
appreciate your time.
You betcha, buddy.
Have a good trip in Africa, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
3 days from now, I'll be sitting around a fire on the side of some river in Africa, and just with high anticipation of the next morning. So, Cape Buffalo, here we come.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.